Talk about assignment number 4. As I was saying earlier, please start. Assignment number 4 basically builds on assignment number 3. It refactors a lot of the things that we had done on the client side and moves them over to the server side. Yes?
Is it recorded?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay, that's the
So whereas in the in assignment 3, we built everything on the client side, and we're storing everything on in the JavaScript running on the client. We're going to refactor those services to send all that data to the server so that we can store it on the server instead. Okay, and to do that, we're going to need to have communication between the client and the server side. Right now, we just have that the Angular application running on its own, running on a browser, and not being able to store any of the state that it's generating as it interacts with the user. Okay. So to do that, we're going to be using HTTP request messages that are going to go from the client side back to the server for storage. There's going to be 4 types of requests that we're going to be using, depending on what it is that we want to do. If we want to be able to create new instances of new objects and add them to some collection, we're going to be using the post HTTP request. If we are going to be retrieving data from the server, we're going to be using get. If we are going to be manipulating or changing, mutating some piece of data on the server that already exists, we're going to be using put. If we're going to remove something, we're going to use delete. Okay, these are HTTP methods, right? That are standard, and we're going to follow the best practices stipulated by RESTful applications. We are going to add the following files to our application. These are all server-side files. Notice that they're not inside of the public directory. Instead, they are under a directory called assignment, and assignment is at the same level as the public directory. So it's whatever you put outside of the public directory is not available from the browser. Okay, it's not accessible from outside of the machine. All right. So we're going to put it under the assignment directory. And we're going to be manipulating and refactoring the services, and we're going to be refactoring some of the controllers as well under the assignments and under the views. We're going to be creating a brand new app.js. This is going to be the server side of our application. Right? There's going to be an app.js that gets downloaded from our servers and it runs on the browser. Right? But then on the server side, we have this app.js that can communicate with the client side, right? So using these HTTP methods. We're going to create our services to manipulate each one of our data types, okay, each one of our domain models, domain objects. And if you remember, there were client-side versions of these, right? We had user service client.js. We had website service client.js, right? These are the mirror images of those. And they're meant to work together. The client side is responsible for sending data when new data is being created, and the server side is responsible for receiving that data and then either storing it on the file system or the database, or for long-term storage or whatnot, right? Or if we want to know the particular collection of pages for a website, then that request would come from the client, and the server would then respond with this data back to the server. Okay, and on the server side, app.js, this app.js is going to be the entry point to our server side application, and its only responsibility is to load all the other modules that are needed on the server side. Right, up to this point is just these 3 other modules, these 4 modules. So from app.js, we're going to load the other services, right? User service, website service, all of these. Okay, and notice that the app.js is going to need an instance of the Express library. This is one way of doing it, passing it in a function from server.js, because notice that in server.js is where we instantiate the instance of Express, right? And then we can pass it along to our app.js as an argument, and it can catch it here to then pass it along to the services for creating the routes that are going to be listening for posts and puts and gets and deletes from incoming clients. And we'll do that in a minute. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Also, the server is going to be receiving data from the client encoded in the HTTP request, in the body of the HTTP request that comes from the client. Okay, and Express out of the box doesn't know how to parse data from the body, from the HTTP body, right? So we're going to have to configure a library that knows how to parse the data, the JSON data from the body, right? Because Express can certainly read easily. It can read parameters from the path. It can read parameters from the query. But out of the box, it doesn't know how to parse the body as a JSON, because I mean there's tons of there's many number of different MIME types that could be encoded in a body, right? JSON is just one of the different MIME types, so we need to load the correct library to parse that correct data. We're going to install body parser as a library to parse this data out of there. These are the URLs that the server is going to need to listen to. So, for instance, user service server is going to be listening for all these incoming HTTP requests from the client. If the client wants to create a new instance of a user, it's going to post to this URL. And it's going to pass data as part of the body, right, for the username and password, first name, last name, whatever data comes from the client. Locally, it's going to execute this function on the server side, right? And the server side is just going to do what the client was doing, right? It's just going to insert it or push it into an existing array. But that array is no longer going to live on the client side, it's going to live on the server side. Eventually, next week, it's going to live in a collection in a database, right, in MongoDB, where it's supposed to live, where it's meant to be from the beginning, right? That's where it needs to end up. But for now, it's going to live on the server side. Then to retrieve a user, we can retrieve a user in three different ways. We can see if a particular username is already taken. Right? See, is there a user with this username, or is there a user with this username and password, right, for logging in? Or if you already know the user ID, we can retrieve that one user by their primary key. Right? All these are going to be get. Right? They're going to be read-only operations, right, from the client needing this data. He's going to come to the server asking for this data. We're going to reply with this data from the server. If the client needs to update a user, it's going to use a put, right, and then an API call providing the ID of the user that we want to update and the new values for that user, like if we're changing the first name, the last name, or the email, or phone numbers, or addresses, right, for that user. We're going to embed that in the body and send it over for updating on the server side. And finally, if we want to remove a user, we're going to generate an HTTP delete to the same API URL endpoint and then splice out that user instance from the array, from the collection. Make sense? These are the URLs for websites. They're basically the same. They all have post, get, put, and delete. Okay. The URLs are a little bit different, and notice that basically they add /website at the end of the URLs we already did in the previous example, right? So all of these start with API user, right, or API user, user ID, right? All of these extend all that by providing the website at the end of the previous URL. If you know a specific website ID, there's no need to specify the parent user ID, right? Because it is an explicit website that you know of, and we don't need to provide the context of the user ID. Whereas post and get, these do need the context of the user ID, because if you're posting, you need to know, well, who created this website, right? You need to know the parent, the developer who developed this. And if you're retrieving the list of websites, you also want to know what are the particular websites for a particular user, right? Who created these websites? We could have had a get API website without a website ID, that would mean I want to know all the websites, right? Regardless of who the user is. And that might be a legitimate use case, maybe for an admin, right, that wants to know all the websites, across all users. But it would not be a sensible use case for any particular user, right, to see a list of all the websites out there. Yes? Right, so we're not implementing that use case yet. Right, later on when we come back and implement some admin functionality, then we can revisit that and we'll talk about implementing this API/website as a list of all the websites across all users. Make sense? Same thing for pages. Pages is the same thing, right? It adds the parent website and then the page for that website, meaning we're creating a new page, we're posting a new page, and we're to this URL, and we're passing along who the parent website is. I mean, this is a page that lives inside of this website, or retrieve all the pages for this particular website. Or here we're retrieving one particular page, right? Again, we're not considering the case where we can list all the pages across all websites, across all users, right? That's not a valid use case. Although for an admin, maybe it might make sense to list all the websites, but even for an admin, perhaps that might not be sensible, right? To just list all the page IDs, page objects. So anyway, so these are valid use cases, right? We're retrieving a particular page, right? Or we are updating a particular page, or we are removing a particular page. Make sense? Okay. Same thing for widgets, right? We want the widgets inside of, we're creating a new widget inside of a particular page. We are retrieving a widget, all the widgets from a particular page. We are retrieving an individual widget if we know their ID. We're updating an existing widget, or we are removing an existing widget. Make sense? All right. All right, so we're going to have to refactor. So this is going to be on the server side, right? We're going to build all these things on the server side. On the client side, we're going to have to refactor the web services. The web services currently are implemented as synchronous calls, right? The controller makes a call to the service, right? And the service looks it up in its local little array, right? And it responds immediately. Yes? But because now it needs to go out to the server to fetch this data, right? We're going to have to be using asynchronous communication between a browser that is running across the world, right? And a server that is running halfway across the other side of the world, and they need to talk to one another through a network connection, right? So it can't be a synchronous communication; it needs to be asynchronous communication, right? So all these will need to be refactored to use asynchronous communication. All the controllers also need to be refactored, right? They're assuming that these services are synchronous, right? So now they're going to be modified to be asynchronous. So we'll need to fix that. The sorting. You're going to implement a directive that allows sorting the widgets, right? It could be as simple as using jQuery and using sortable on it, but it's not the right way of doing it, right? Usually when you want to embed or enhance some behavior using jQuery, the sensible thing to do it is to wrap it inside of a directive, okay? And we'll see how to do work with directives. And that would allow you to move the widgets up and down. The image widget, we're going to be improving it. Right now, the image widget allows you to copy and paste the URL of an image, right? That you found somewhere. We're gonna enhance it so that you can alternatively you can upload an image, right, to the server. And once that image has been copied locally on the server, then you're going to calculate what the URL is, right, and that maps to the local file system, and then you're going to set that as the property, the URL property for the widget, right, so that when it renders on the client, right, it's going to come back to the server to fetch that image for rendering, okay, as opposed to going out to the cloud and fetching images from the cloud. Make sense? All right. So, and here I have some piece of code that should help you get started. For be able to upload the image to the server. So this is from the client side, right? This is from the widget's point of view, running on the client side on the browser, and this is from the server's point of view. is going to be listening for an incoming post that's going to submit and start streaming the file, the uploading file from the browser, from the browser's machine, streaming it over and copying it over onto the server side, and then there's a whole bunch of metadata about the file size, the original file name, the MIME type of the file that we uploaded, the size and whatnot, and so that you can then update your widget objects. And so we'll take a look at that today. Also, an alternative thing to do is to search a third-party API for images, right? Such as Flickr or Google Images or whatever, right? Where you can type in some title, and then this API would retrieve URLs of images that match your search criteria, right? We're going to be using Flickr, since it's free, and so here's a start code that you can get started that allows you to type in a search title and search from Flickr, and then iterate over a list of URLs of images that come from Flickr, right? So here's a service that can be used to talk to Flickr, and which we'll go over today. And then it allows that you should be able to select and click on the photo and say, "Ooh, this is the photo that I want," right? And so you have to calculate what the URL is of that photo that you just clicked on. That is the URL you're going to set in the image's URL attribute. Yes? We'll go over this today. Deliverables. This is assignment number 4. You're going to tag it as assignment 4 and make it available. Excuse me. Thank you. All right. Any questions? One of these might be moved to the next assignment. Probably not going to be able to do all 3 things. Meaning the Flickr, the upload, and the routing, the reordering. I'll see. Or maybe we'll move the due date a couple of days, perhaps. We'll see. All right, so let's get started.